Keisha Evans sprawled bruised and bloody on the cracked pavement behind Carver High's gym in dusty Laredo, Texas, her dark skin smeared with dirt as white students jeered. Tatum Hayes, blonde and smug, turned away, thinking she'd crushed another black girl under Laredo's rules. Everyone assumed Keisha was done. Then her eyes snapped open, blazing with fury nobody expected from the quiet new kid. She's a trained fighter, and this beatdown ignites a war that'll scar the town forever. What happens when the hunted fights back? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against bullies, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's explosive episode is one you can't miss. Keisha Evans stepped off the rattling Greyhound bus into the blistering heat of Laredo, Texas, her sneakers crunching on gravel as the sun scorched the earth to a brittle brown. Sweat beaded on her forehead, trickling past her tight braids, but she barely noticed. At 17, she'd seen enough cities to know this one wasn't welcoming. Confederate flags fluttered on sagging porches lining the cracked streets, their faded red and blue a silent warning to someone like her. She adjusted, the straps of her worn backpack, the weight of her books and a single change of clothes pressing into her shoulders. Her dad, Jamal, had dragged them here from Atlanta, chasing a fresh start after his gym shut down. Keisha didn't argue, she never did. All she wanted was to finish her senior year at Carver High, keep her head down, and vanish into the background. Like a shadow, nobody bothered to chase. The bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving her standing alone on the edge of town, dust swirling around her ankles. Laredo wasn't big, just a sprawl of low brick buildings and gas stations hugged by endless flatland. She squinted at the horizon, the sky a washed-out blue, and started walking toward the school, a hulking red brick structure 3 miles out. Jamal had promised to meet her later with their beat-up pickup, but for now she was on her own. The air smelled of diesel and dry grass, thick with a stillness that made her skin prickle. She'd moved enough times, 6 schools in 4 years, to recognize the vibe of a place that didn't want her kind. Black skin stood out here, a bullseye she couldn't peel off no matter how quiet she stayed. Carver High loomed ahead, its dull, grey windows glinting like judgmental eyes. Kids spilled across the front lawn, laughing and shoving, their voices a chaotic hum. Keisha pulled her hoodie up, hiding her face as she slipped into the stream of bodies pouring through the double doors. Inside, the halls were a maze of chipped lockers and flickering fluorescence, the air heavy with sweat and cheap cologne. She kept her gaze low, weaving through the crowd, her backpack a shield against the elbows and shoulders brushing too close. Most students were white, their pale faces turning to stare as she passed. A few whispered, their words sharp little jabs she couldn't quite catch but felt deep in her gut. She'd been the new girl before, always the black girl in a sea of strangers, but this felt different, heavier, like the air itself was sizing her up. Her locker was tucked at the end of a narrow corridor, number 312 scratched into the metal. She spun the combination, her fingers steady despite the knot tightening in her chest. The door creaked open, revealing a rusted interior, and she started unloading her books, stacking them with precision. That's when she saw it, carved into the paint with a jagged edge, a single word ugly and raw screaming in all caps, nigger. Her breath caught, a cold spike driving through her ribs. She stared at it, the letters blurring as her pulse hammered in her ears. It wasn't the first time she'd seen hate scratched into her life, but it still burned, a fresh wound every time. She slammed the locker shut, the clang echoing down the hall, and forced herself to breathe. Stay quiet, she thought. Leave no trace. That's how you survive. The bell shrieked, splitting the noise of the hallway, and she headed to her first class, English, slipping into a seat at the back. The room filled fast, kids chattering about football and weekend plans, their eyes sliding over her like she was furniture. She pulled out her notebook, keeping her head down, pen tracing idle loops on the page. Then the cafeteria loomed at lunch, a cavernous space buzzing with clicks and trays clattering. Keisha grabbed a sandwich and found a corner table, the plastic chair creaking under her weight. She ate slowly, eyes scanning the room, mapping exits like her dad had taught her back when he still threw punches for a living. That's when she noticed her Tatum haze stood out like a spotlight in a storm, blonde hair cascading in perfect waves down her back, her cheerleader skirt swishing as she strutted through the crowd. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with skin so pale it glowed under the harsh lights. Her green eyes flicked across the room, sharp and predatory, landing on Keisha with a glint that made her stomach twist. Tatum wasn't just pretty. She carried herself like she owned the air everyone else breathed. Two girls flanked her, one with a tight ponytail snapping gum, the other giggling into her phone, but it was Tatum who drew every gaze. Keisha recognized the type, the queen bee who thrived on picking bones clean. She'd seen it in Atlanta, in Memphis, in every school where power came with a smile and a knife hidden behind it. Tatum's lips curled as she locked eyes with Keisha, a slow, deliberate smirk that said she'd found her next plaything. Keisha looked away, focusing on her sandwich, but she could feel the weight of that stare boring into her skull. Minutes later, Tatum sauntered over, her posse trailing like obedient dogs. She stopped at Keisha's table, one hand on her hip, the other clutching a soda can. "New girl, huh?" she said, her voice syrupy sweet with an edge that could cut glass. "Where'd they ship you in from, some ghetto?" The ponytail girl snorted, and the phone girl glanced up, smirking. Keisha didn't answer, taking a bite of her food, chewing slow to keep her hands from balling into fists. "Oh, she's shy," Tatum cooed, leaning closer. "Don't worry. We'll fix that." Before Keisha could react, Tatum's foot darted out, hooking Keisha's chair, leg and yanking hard. The chair tipped and Keisha lurched forward, her tray crashing to the floor with a wet splat. Mashed potatoes and gravy smeared across the tiles, her sandwich tumbling into the mess. Laughter erupted, a wave of it rolling through the cafeteria as kids turned to gawk. Tatum stepped back, grinning like she'd just won a prize, her posse cackling behind her. "Oops," she said, mock innocence dripping from every syllable. "Guess you're too clumsy to sit with the civilized folks." Keisha hit the ground hard, her palms slapping the cold floor, gravy soaking into her jeans. She stayed there a beat, breath hitching, the sting of humiliation hotter than the Texas sun outside. Faces blurred around her, white kids pointing, their laughter a jagged chorus. She could feel the old fire licking up her spine, the one her dad had spent years teaching her to cage. Back in Atlanta, she'd trained in his gym since she could walk, learning jabs and hooks on a heavy bag until her knuckles bled. She wasn't just some quiet new kid. She was a fighter, muscles coiled tight under her skin, reflexes honed to snap a wrist before anyone blinked. But she'd sworn off that life after the last school, after the blood and the screams and the transfer papers. She pushed herself up, knees trembling, not from fear but from the effort to stay still, her hands clenched, nails digging into her palms, drawing tiny crescents of pain to keep her grounded. Tatum stood there, arms crossed, waiting for tears or a scream, something to feed her ego. Keisha gave her nothing. She wiped her hands on her pants, grabbed her backpack and stood, staring Tatum down with eyes like steel. The laughter faltered, a few kids shifting uncomfortably as the air thickened. Tatum's smirk twitched, but she held it, tilting her head. "What?" "Too scared to talk, black girl?" she taunted, popping her gum loud enough to echo. Keisha's jaw tightened, every muscle begging to lunge, to wipe that grin off Tatum's face with one clean strike. She could see it, Tatum sprawled on the tiles, blonde hair fanned out in the gravy, the crowd gasping instead of cheering. But she swallowed it down, the rage a bitter pill lodging in her throat. She turned, stepping over the mess, and walked out, the cafeteria's noise swelling behind her. Tatum's voice cut through, sharp and triumphant. "That's right, run back to whatever hole you crawled out of." More laughter chased her, but Keisha kept moving, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, her mind racing. Outside, the air hit her like a slap, dry and hot, the school's shadow stretching long across the parking lot. She leaned against a wall, breathing deep, forcing the fire back into its cage. She'd wanted invisibility, a senior year without waves, but Laredo had other plans. That word on her locker wasn't random. It was a welcome mat laid out by people like Tatum. Keisha knew girls like her didn't stop at one shove. They fed on weakness, and her silence was blood in the water. She glanced back at the school, its red bricks glowing in the afternoon light, and felt a chill despite the heat. Tatum had marked her, and this was just the opening punch. Jamal's voice echoed in her head, low and steady from years of coaching her through bruises and broken bags. "Stay quiet, Keisha. Leave no trace. That's how we get through." She nodded then, believing it. But now, with gravy drying on her jeans and Tatum's laugh ringing in her ears, she wasn't sure. Her fists twitched, muscle memory itching to break free. She'd come to Laredo to hide, to finish high school and fade out. But Carver High wasn't giving her that option. Tatum Hayes had picked her target, and Keisha's gut told her this was only the first bell in a fight she couldn't duck forever. Keisha Evans had survived her first week at Carver High in Laredo, Texas, but survival wasn't peace. The whispers followed her like flies on a carcass, buzzing louder each day she walked the halls with her head down. Tatum Hayes hadn't let up since that cafeteria stunt, her blonde ponytail swishing like a whip as she orchestrated the taunts. "Lost your tongue, ghetto girl?" she'd sneer, her posse snickering as Keisha passed. Lockers slammed shut with new slurs etched into way. Hers crude letters spelling out hate she couldn't scrub away. She'd clench her fists, nails biting into her palms, and keep moving, her dad's mantra looping in her skull. Stay quiet. Leave no trace. But silence was a flimsy shield in a town like this, where every step she took as a black girl painted. A target bigger than the last. By Friday, the air in Carver High crackled with a tension Keisha could taste, bitter and metallic on her tongue. Gym class was the breaking point, a sweaty hour under the Texas sun on a field baked hard as concrete. She'd swapped her hoodie for a faded t-shirt, her lean arms flexing as she stretched alone near the bleachers. Tatum strutted onto the grass, her cheerleader skirt bouncing, her green eyes locking onto Keisha like a hawk spotting a rabbit. The other kids paired off for drills, their chatter a dull roar, but Tatum veered straight for her, flanked by the ponytail girl chewing gum loud enough to pop eardrums. Keisha kept her gaze on the ground, counting breaths, willing her pulse. Too steady. She dodged enough fights to know when one was brewing, and Tatum reeked of it. "Still pretending you belong here?" Tatum called, her voice slicing through the noise, sharp and gleeful. Keisha didn't bite, bending to tie her sneaker, but Tatum closed the gap, her shadow falling long and cold over the dirt. "Look at me when I'm talking, trash!" she snapped. And before Keisha could straighten, Tatum's hands shot out, slamming into her shoulders. The shove was hard, deliberate, sending Keisha stumbling back into the bleacher's metal edge. Pain flared up her spine, a hot jolt that snapped something loose inside her. She caught herself, palms scraping the rust, and looked up, meeting Tatum's smirk with a glare that could have melted steel. The crowd hushed, heads turning, sensing blood in the water. Keisha's chest heaved, her dad's words drowning under a roar she couldn't cage anymore. She'd taken the stairs, the slurs, the spilled tray. But this was a line Tatum shouldn't have crossed. "Back off," she said low and tight, her voice a warning Tatum didn't heed. Instead, the blonde laughed, a high, mocking sound that grated like glass on gravel. "Oh, she speaks. What's next? You gonna cry?" Tatum stepped closer, shoving again, but this time Keisha was ready. Her fighter's instincts kicked in, muscle memory from years in Jamal's gym flooding her veins. She sidestepped, grabbed Tatum's wrist mid-push, and twisted, using the girl's momentum to send her spinning. Tatum yelped, her perfect hair flying as she hit the ground, landing flat on her back with a thud that echoed off the bleachers. A gasp rippled through the students, wide eyes darting between Keisha and the blonde sprawled in the dirt. Tatum's ponytail friend froze, gum slipping from her mouth, while others backed up, sneakers scuffing the field. Keisha stood tall, her breath steadying, adrenaline singing in her blood. She'd kept it clean, no punches, just a flip to prove, a point. Tatum scrambled up, her skirt smeared with dust, her face flushed red with fury and shock. "You're dead," she hissed, brushing off her knees. But Keisha just stared her down, silent again, letting the moment sink in. For a split second she thought it worked, that Tatum might slink away, tail between her legs. The bell rang shrill and jarring, and the crowd scattered, leaving whispers in their wake. Keisha grabbed her backpack, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and dread. Maybe this was enough to carve out some space, to breathe without a boot on her neck. She was wrong. The day dragged on, classes blurring into a haze of chalk dust and droning teachers, but the air felt heavier, charged, with something she couldn't name. After the final bell, Keisha headed out, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. She'd made it halfway to the chain-link fence when a hulking figure stepped into her path, blocking the cracked sidewalk. Cole Hayes, Tatum's older brother, loomed like a wall of muscle, his football jersey stretched tight over shoulders built to crush quarterbacks. His buzzed brown hair glinted in the fading light, and his blue eyes narrowed, cold and mean. He was 19, a senior too, held back a year for reasons nobody dared ask. Keisha stopped short, her stomach dropping as he cracked his knuckles, the sound loud in the quiet. "How you think you can touch my sister and walk away?" Cole's voice rumbled, low and thick with menace. Keisha glanced around, the lot emptying fast, kids vanishing into cars or down streets. No help, no witnesses. She squared her shoulders, chin up but didn't speak. Cole took a step closer, his bulk filling her vision, his breath sour with chewing tobacco. "This ain't Atlanta, girl. Around here, you don't get to play tough." He lunged, faster than she'd expected for his size, and slammed her against the fence. The metal rattled, digging into her back as he pinned her there, one meaty hand gripping her collar, the other cocked back like a loaded gun. Keisha's mind raced, her training screaming to counter, to duck and strike, but she froze, Jamal's voice cutting through the panic. "Stay quiet," she gasped, air thin in her lungs as Cole leaned in, his face inches from hers. "Know your place or I'll bury you in it," he snarled, spit flecking her cheek. He shoved her harder, her head banging against the links, then let go, stepping, back with a grin that promised worse. Keisha slid down, knees buckling, her vision swimming as he sauntered off, his laugh a low growl fading into the dusk. She stayed there panting, the fence cold against her palms until the lot was empty, the school a silent hulk behind her. When she finally stood, her legs shook, but her eyes burned. Bruises bloomed under her shirt, a dull ache spreading with each step home. The house was a squat rental on the edge of town, paint peeling like old skin, and Jamal was waiting, his wiry frame hunched over a toolbox in the garage. He took one look at her, the way she moved stiff and slow, and his face darkened. "What happened?" he asked, voice rough but soft, the tone he'd used when she'd come home with split lips from sparring. She told him, the shove, the flip, Cole's ambush, her words flat, stripping it to facts. He listened, jaw tight, then shook his head. "You can't keep poking bears, Keisha. Restraint's what keeps us alive here." She nodded, but inside, something shifted. Jamal saw the marks, the purple blooming on her arms, and sighed, pulling her into a quick, hard hug. "We're outsiders. They don't forget that." He turned back to his tools, leaving her standing there, the ache in her bones warring with the fire in her gut. She'd pushed back, tasted a sliver of control, and thought it might buy her peace. Cole's fists said otherwise. The teachers hadn't stepped in, their averted eyes as damning as the slurs on her locker. This wasn't just Tatum's game, it was Laredo's, a town rigged to break her. As she climbed the creaky stairs to her room, her fists twitched, the eyes, fighter inside clawing at its cage. She'd tried silence, tried restraint, but Carver High wasn't letting her hide. Now let's hear from you in the comments. Drop a number 1 if you think Keisha should have hit back harder at Tatum, or a 2 if you'd have stayed quiet like her dad said. Does Cole's attack make your blood boil, or do you see his type coming a mile away? Smash that like button if you're rooting for Keisha to flip this town upside down, and subscribe because you won't believe what's coming next. Her small win just lit a fuse. But how far will Tatum's family push her before she snaps? Can she keep her fists in check, or is Laredo about to see what a real fighter can do? Keisha Evans thought her pushback in gym class had bought her some breathing room at Carver High. Tatum Hayes had gone quiet after sprawling in the dirt, her blonde hair tangled with dust, her posse slinking away under the bleachers' shadow. For 2 days the taunts stopped, The whispers dulled to a hum, and Keisha dared to hope she'd carved out a sliver of respect in Laredo's unforgiving turf. She walked the halls with her head a little higher, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum, her backpack slung loose over one shoulder. The bruises from Cole's ambush ached under her hoodie, but she could handle pain. She'd handled worse in Atlanta, sparring with grown men in her dad's gym until her knuckles split. This felt different, like a win, however small. Monday morning shattered that illusion. Keisha slid into her usual routine, locker 312 creaking open as she stuffed her English book inside. The air felt off, a prickling on her neck she couldn't shake. She glanced down the hall, catching Tatum's green eyes glinting from a knot of cheerleaders, her smirk sharp as a blade. Keisha ignored it, slamming her locker shut, the slur still etched there like a brand she couldn't erase. She headed to third period algebra, her mind on equations, not games. That's when it happened. Halfway through class, the door banged open, and Principal Vargas strode in, a short man with a sweaty brow and a tie too tight for his thick neck. Behind him loomed Sheriff Hayes, Tatum's father, his khaki uniform crisp, badge gleaming like a warning. "Keisha Evans," Vargas barked, his voice cutting through the chalk dust haze. "Stand up." She froze, pencil hovering over her notebook, her heart thudding against her ribs. Every eye in the room snapped to her, white faces curious, some smirking. She stood slow, legs steady despite the tremor in her gut, and faced them. Sheriff Hayes stepped forward, his boots thumping the floor, his square jaw set hard. "We got a tip," he said, loud enough for the back row to hear. "You're carrying." Keisha blinked, confusion twisting her features. "Carrying what?" she asked, voice low but firm. He didn't answer, just jerked his head at a deputy trailing him, a wiry guy with a buzz cut and a sneer. The deputy yanked her backpack from under her desk, unzipping it with a flourish that sent her books tumbling. Pens clattered, her water bottle rolled, and then he pulled out a plastic baggie, green clumps inside catching the light. Weed. Keisha's breath stopped, her mind racing to catch up. "That ain't mine," she said, sharp and clear, but the sheriff's eyes glinted with something ugly, triumphant. "Sure it isn't," he drawled, thick Texas accent dripping with mockery. "Hands behind your back." Before she could argue, the deputy grabbed her wrists, cuffs clicking cold and tight around them. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs, kids craning their necks as she was marched out, her sneakers dragging on the tiles. In the hall, Tatum leaned against a locker, arms crossed, her smirk wide enough to split her face. Keisha's gaze locked on her, realization slamming home. This was no random bust, it was a setup, Tatum's revenge for the gym. Sheriff Hayes pushed her forward, his hand heavy on her shoulder, steering her past gawking students into the principal's office. Vargas sat behind his desk, papers scattered, his face a mask of fake concern. "We don't tolerate drugs here," he said, not meeting her eyes. Keisha's voice rose, steady despite the cuffs biting her skin. "I didn't do this. Check my record. I don't touch that stuff." Hayes snorted, leaning against the wall, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Your kind always says that. Her kind." The words hit like a punch, raw and racial, stripping away any pretense. She opened her mouth to fight back, but he cut her off. "Save it for court, girl." They hauled her out, past the cafeteria where she'd first faced Tatum, past the gym where she'd flipped her, and into a squad car parked brazenly in the lot. Kids pressed against windows, phones up, filming her like some criminal in a show. The deputy shoved her into the back seat, the vinyl hot and sticky under her jeans, and the door slammed shut. Through the glass, she saw Tatum high-five her ponytail. "Friend?" Laughter silent but loud in Keisha's head. At the station, they booked her, fingerprints smudging ink onto her hands, her mugshot a stark flash against a grey wall. She sat in a holding cell, concrete cold under her, the stink of bleach and metal thick in her nose. Jamal came running, his wiry frame tense, eyes wild as he argued with the desk clerk. "She's clean, I swear it," he said, voice cracking. But the sheriff waved him off, smirking from his office doorway. Hours dragged, Keisha's mind spinning. She'd beaten the shove, thought she'd won, but Tatum had flipped the board, turned her defiance into this. Her fists clenched. Useless against bars, the fighter inside raging at a foe she couldn't touch. Then came the twist. Mr. Lopez, the school janitor, a quiet man with grey streaks in his hair, shuffled into the station late that afternoon. He carried a grainy security tape, his hands trembling as he handed it to a reluctant deputy. "Caught it by the lockers," he muttered, avoiding Hayes's glare. The footage showed Tatum, clear as daylight, slipping the baggie into Keisha's backpack during a passing period, her blonde hair unmistakable. Keisha watched from the cell, hope flickering as the sheriff's face darkened. He couldn't bury it. Lopez had copied the tape, sent it to the superintendent. By nightfall, the cuffs came off, her suspension lifted, and Vargas muttered an apology that sounded like gravel in his throat. Keisha walked out, Jamal's arm around her shoulders, the station's fluorescent buzz fading behind them. The air outside was cool, stars pricking the Texas sky, and she breathed deep, tasting freedom. "Told you we'd get through," Jamal said, squeezing her tight, his voice proud. She nodded, a rare smile tugging her lips. The tape had cleared. Her humiliated Tatum maybe even scared her off. Sheriff Hayes had stormed off, barking at his deputies, his power checked for once. Keisha climbed into their pickup, the engine rumbling to life, and let herself believe it was over. She dodged the frame-up, turned their lie into her win. Carver High might back off now, give her the peace she'd craved since stepping off that bus. That hope lasted 3 hours. They pulled into their dirt driveway, the rental house squat and dark under a sagging oak. Jamal cut the engine, and Keisha stepped out, her sneakers crunching gravel. Then she saw it, glinting in the headlights, their truck, parked beside the porch, its hood smashed, windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Spray paint streaked across the side in jagged red letters. "Go back where you came from." The tires sagged, slashed to ribbons, rubber curling like dead snakes. Keisha's stomach dropped, her victory souring fast. Jamal swore under his breath, rushing to inspect the damage, his toolbox clattering as he dropped it. She stood frozen, the night pressing in, cicadas screaming in the distance. This wasn't random. It was Tatum, Cole, the Hayes family striking back. The sheriff hadn't stopped them. He'd probably cheered them on, his badge a free pass for revenge. Keisha's hands shook, not from fear but fury, the kind that made her want to march back to Carver and break someone. She'd beaten the setup, walked free, but Laredo didn't care about justice. The tape had cleared her name, not her skin, and the Hayes clan wasn't done. Jamal kicked a shredded tire, his voice hoarse. "They won't quit, Keisha. We gotta be smarter." She nodded, but her eyes burned, staring at the wrecked truck, the slur blazing in the dark. Smarter. Wasn't enough, silence wasn't enough. She'd thought the win would shield her, give her space to breathe, but it had only painted a bigger target. The station's cold cuffs faded to memory, replaced by this fresh wound, a message carved into their lives. Tatum's smirk flashed. In her mind, that high five replaying like a taunt. Keisha's fists tightened, knuckles whitening, the fighter inside clawing harder at its cage. She'd dodged one trap, but the Hayes family had more, and this hit harder, deeper, a promise of worse to come. As Jamal dragged a tarp over the truck, she turned toward the house, her shadow long and jagged, knowing peace was a lie Laredo wouldn't let her keep. Keisha Evans stepped back into Carver High with her chin up, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum 2 days after the frame-up fell apart. The security tape had cleared her name, sent Tatum Hayes slinking into the shadows, and left Sheriff Hayes, fuming behind his badge. She'd walked out of that station with her dad's arm around her, the taste of victory sharp on her tongue, even as their slashed truck tires lingered in her mind. Tuesday morning in Laredo dawned hot and dry, the Texas, sun baking the red brick school into a simmering oven. Keisha wore her hoodie despite the heat, the bruises from Cole's fence slam fading to a dull throb under the fabric. She moved through the crowded halls, her backpack light on her shoulders, feeling the shift in the air. Eyes followed her, not just with scorn now, but with something new, a flicker of awe. Kids whispered as she passed, their voices a low buzz cutting through the locker slams and laughter. "She got Tatum good," one muttered, a skinny white boy with acne dotting his cheeks. "Sheriff couldn't even pin her," another hissed, a girl with braces clutching her books. Keisha kept her gaze ahead, her braids swaying with each step, pretending not to hear. The slurs on her locker had been painted over, a sloppy grey patch that didn't hide the hate beneath, but it was something. She slid into English class, taking her corner seat, and let herself believe the storm might have passed. Maybe exposing Tatum's lie had flipped the script, forced Laredo to back off. Her pen scratched across her notebook, the normalcy of it almost soothing. Lunchtime tested that hope. The cafeteria buzzed louder than usual, trays clattering, voices rising over the hum of industrial fans. Keisha grabbed a burger and fries, weaving through the chaos to her usual spot, a table tucked against the far wall. She sat, biting into the bun, her eyes scanning the room out of habit. That's when she saw them, Tatum emerging from the crowd, like a shark through waves, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights. She wasn't alone. Cole loomed at her side, his football bulk dwarfing her, his jaw tight with a scowl. A new face joined them, Lila Hayes, their cousin, a wiry girl with dark curls and a smile too sly for comfort. She moved like she knew secrets nobody else did, her hazel eyes darting over the room. Tatum's green stare locked on Keisha, cold and unyielding, her smirk gone, replaced by something harder, darker. Keisha's gut twisted, her burger dropping to the tray. She'd humiliated Tatum twice now, flipped her in gym, exposed her frame up, and Laredo's golden girl wasn't taking it lying down. The trio didn't approach, just stood there, heads bent together, plotting. Keisha chewed slow, her pulse ticking up, every instinct screaming trouble. She'd thought the tape was a shield, but it had only sharpened Tatum's claws. Minutes. Later the bell rang and she headed out, the weight of their glares trailing her like smoke. After school, the parking lot baked under a relentless sun, heat shimmering off the asphalt. Keisha cut through it, aiming for the shortcut home, a dirt path skirting the field. She'd made it 10 steps when the air shifted, a rustle of footsteps crunching behind her. She turned, and there they were, Tatum, Cole, Lila, and a pack of 6 others. White kids with sneers and fists already bald. Bottles glinted in their hands, beer and soda, the glass catching the light like weapons. "Thought you could strut around here like you won," Tatum spat, her voice venomous, stepping forward as the leader. Cole cracked his neck. Lila twirled. A bottle, and the rest fanned out, cutting off her escape. Keisha dropped her backpack, her stance widening, years of training snapping into place. "Walk away," she said, calm but edged, her eyes flicking between them. Tatum laughed, a harsh bark, and hurled her bottle. It smashed at Keisha's feet, glass exploding, soda splashing her sneakers. The others followed, projectiles flying, a barrage of brown and green shattering around her. She dodged, ducking low, weaving through the chaos, her heart pounding a war drum in her chest. A rock grazed her arm, tearing skin, blood beading hot and red. She sprinted, breaking for the field's edge, their shouts chasing her, slurs slicing the air. "Run, bitch!" Cole bellowed, his voice a roar. She made it to the fence, vaulting over, her cuts stinging as she landed, thinking she'd outrun them. The mob didn't follow, their laughter fading as she stumbled down the path, breath ragged, blood trickling down her elbow. She stopped under a twisted oak, panting, her hoodie torn where a bottle had clipped her. The cuts were shallow, the damage light, and she let herself smile, grim and fleeting. She'd escaped, turned their ambush into a miss. Jamal would patch her up, tell her to lay low, and maybe this would fizzle out. She grabbed her backpack, slung it over her good arm, and trudged home, the sun dipping low, painting the sky a bruised purple. That night peace was a lie. Keisha sat on their sagging couch, Jamal dabbing antiseptic on her arm, his calloused hands gentle but firm. "You're tough, girl," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But this town's tougher." She nodded, wincing as the sting bit deep, the TV flickering with some old western neither watched. Then it came, a crash that shook the house, glass shattering in a deafening burst. Keisha bolted up, Jamal dropping the cotton as they rushed to the living room. A brick lay in the wreckage of their window, jagged edges glinting amidst the shards. A note taped to it in scrawled black ink, "Leave or die." The curtains flapped in the hot night breeze, the threat hanging heavy in the air. Keisha's blood ran cold, her cuts forgotten as she stared at the words, the paper trembling in her grip. Jamal snatched it, his face a mask of fury and fear, his eyes darting to the dark beyond the broken pane. "They're animals," he growled, crumpling the note, but his voice shook, betraying the calm he faked. Keisha stepped to the window, glass crunching under her sneakers, peering into the shadows. Nothing moved, just the hum of crickets and the distant bark of a dog, but she knew who'd done it. Tatum's crew, Cole's muscle, Lila's cunning, all backed by Sheriff Hayes's untouchable smirk. She dodged their bottles, slipped their trap, but they'd hit harder, closer, aiming for her soul. Jamal grabbed his phone, dialing the sheriff's office, his voice rising as he demanded action. "Brick through my damn window, Hayes! Do! Your job!" Keisha watched, her fists clenching, knowing what had come. Minutes later, a deputy rolled up, a lanky kid with a lazy drawl, his flashlight sweeping the yard. "Probably just kids messing around," he said, barely glancing at the brick, his tone dismissive. "File a report if you want, but don't expect much." He tipped his hat, smirking, and drove off, leaving them with a hole in their wall and a threat in their hands. Sheriff Hayes hadn't just ignored it. He'd greenlit it, his family's wrath spilling past the school into their lives. Keisha sank onto the couch, glass crunching under her weight, her mind racing. She'd walked back into Carver High proud, thinking she'd turned the tide, but Tatum had rallied a mob, escalated from taunts to terror. The bottles were a warning, the brick a promise, and the sheriff's shrug a cage she couldn't break. Jamal paced, muttering about moving again, but Keisha's eyes burned, staring at the shattered window. She wasn't just fighting a clique, she was up against a town, its roots rotten with hate. Her cuts throbbed, her home violated, and the fighter inside her screamed louder now, clawing at the bars she'd built. She'd escaped once, but Laredo wasn't letting her run forever. Now let's get your take in the comments. Drop a number 1 if you think Keisha should have fought that mob head-on, or a 2 if dodging was her only shot. Does Tatum's crew crossing into her home make you want to see her strike back twice as hard? Hit that like button if you're raging at this town's dirty game, and subscribe because the next twist will flip everything you expect. She slipped their trap, but what happens when the Hayes family trades bottles for something deadlier? Will Keisha's fists stay quiet, or is this the spark that lights her fire? Keisha Evans woke the next morning with glass still crunching under her sneakers, the brick's threat etched into her mind like the slurs on her locker. The shattered window gaped at her, a jagged mouth in their Laredo rental, the note's words. "Leave or die," a pulse in her ears. Jamal had boarded it up with plywood before dawn, his hammer strikes sharp and angry, but the house felt flimsy now, a target in a town that wanted her gone. She dodged Tatum Hayes's mob in the parking lot, her cuts scabbing over, but the brick was a gut punch, proof the Hayes family wouldn't stop. Keisha's hands trembled as she laced her shoes, not from fear but from a fire she couldn't douse. She needed control, a way to fight back without losing herself. After school, she slipped away, telling Jamal she'd be late. He grunted, hunched, over their slashed truck, his wrench clanking as he tried to patch what Laredo kept breaking. Keisha headed to an old warehouse on the town's edge, a sagging relic Jamal had rented cheap for storage. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, sunlight slicing through cracked windows onto a concrete floor stained with oil. She'd found it last week, a sanctuary where she could breathe, think, train. Her dad's old heavy bag slumped in the corner, patched with duct tape, a ghost of his Atlanta gym. She dropped her backpack, peeled off her hoodie and wrapped her hands, the fabric tight around knuckles that ached to hit something real. The first punch landed hard, a thud that echoed off the rusted beams, her braids swinging as she moved. She danced around the bag, jabs snapping out, hooks curving in, sweat beading on her dark skin. Jamal had drilled her since she was 5, turning her into a fighter before she knew what it meant. "It's not just fists," he'd say, his voice gravelly from years in the ring. "It's knowing when to use 'em." She'd sworn off that life after Atlanta, after blood she didn't mean to spill, but Laredo wasn't giving her a choice. The mob, the brick, Tatum's smirk, they were chains she couldn't shake with silence. Each strike shook the bag, her breath huffing out in rhythm, her cuts stinging as she pushed harder. She trained for an hour, muscles coiling tight, imagining Tatum's face in the leather, Cole's bulk crumbling under her fists. By Wednesday, she felt stronger, sharper, the warehouse her shield against a town that hated her blackness. She walked into Carver High with a quiet edge, her hoodie up, her eyes scanning the halls. Tatum hadn't shown her face since the parking lot, her posse scattered, but Keisha knew better than to trust the calm. Third period ended, and she headed to her locker, the grey paint patchy over the hate still lurking beneath. That's when Tatum appeared, strutting down the corridor, her cheerleader skirt swishing, her blonde hair a gleaming crown. She stopped 5 feet away, arms crossed, green eyes glinting with something Keisha couldn't read. "You think you're untouchable now," Tatum said, her voice low, venomous, loud enough for the kids nearby to turn. Keisha shut her locker, slow and deliberate, meeting Tatum's stare with steel. "I don't think anything," she replied, her tone flat, her hands loose at her sides. Tatum stepped closer, her smirk twitching, a predator sizing up prey. "That tape won't save you forever," she hissed, her breath hot with mint gum. Keisha's pulse ticked up, her training itching to break free. She'd flipped Tatum once, dodged her mob, beaten her frame up. Silence hadn't worked, and neither had waiting. Before Tatum could blink, Keisha moved, swift and sure, her fighters. Instincts a blur. She grabbed Tatum's arm, twisted it behind her back and slammed her chest first into the lockers with a clang that rang down the hall. Tatum gasped, her cheek pressed to the metal, her free hand flailing. Keisha leaned in, voice a whisper in her ear. "Stop coming for me." She held her there a beat, long enough for the crowd to gape, then let go, stepping back as Tatum stumbled. Her skirt hiked up, her face red with shock and rage. Kids whispered, phones slipping out, filming the blonde queen pinned by the quiet. "Black girl." Tatum spun, her eyes wild, but she didn't swing. She straightened, brushing her hair back, her smirk gone, replaced by a glare that promised hell. "You'll pay," she spat, then turned, stalking off, her heels clicking sharp on the tiles. Keisha stood tall, her breath steady, adrenaline singing in her veins. She'd flipped Tatum again, this time in front of everyone, a clean move. No blood, just power. The hall buzzed, kids parting as she walked away, her sneakers soft on the floor. For a moment she felt untouchable, like the warehouse had forged her into something Carver High couldn't break. She'd sent a message. And maybe, just maybe, Tatum would back off. That hope crumbled by dusk. Keisha got home, the plywood window a grim reminder of the night before, Jamal still out scavenging parts for the truck. She dropped her backpack, grabbed a water from the fridge, and froze. A shadow moved outside, quick and sly, ducking past the oak. Her pulse spiked, but before she could react, the front door creaked open, and Lila Hayes slipped in, her dark curls bouncing, her hazel eyes glinting with a smile too sweet to trust. "Hey, Keisha," she said, casual as if they were friends. "Heard you're tough. Want to talk?" Keisha tensed, her hand tightening on the bottle, every nerve screaming trap. Lila perched on the couch, uninvited, crossing her legs like she owned the place. "Tatum's pissed," she said, her voice light, teasing. "That locker thing, bold, but we're not here to fight." Keisha stayed silent, watching, her training keeping her still. Lila leaned forward, her smile widening. "You've got guts. I respect that. Tell me how you feel about all this." Keisha's gut churned, suspicion clawing up her spine. "Get out," she said, low and firm, pointing to the door. Lila shrugged, standing slow. "Fine, just thought you'd vent. Tatum's not worth it, right?" She sauntered out, leaving the air thick with unease. Keisha locked the door, her mind racing. Lila's visit stank of a play, but she couldn't pin it. She'd won the whole fight, felt strong, but something was off. That night it hit. A video surfaced online, grainy but clear, showing Tatum slamming into the lockers, Keisha's move clipped to look unprovoked. Lila's voice narrated, soft and sly. "She attacked my cousin for no reason. She's dangerous." The footage, cut off before Tatum's shove, twisting the truth into a lie. By morning, Carver High was ablaze with it, kids whispering, teachers glaring. Keisha walked in, and the air turned hostile, her small victory flipped into a noose. Mrs. Carter, a white math teacher with pinched lips, called her out in second period. "You're banned from prom," she snapped, her eyes cold. "We don't reward violence." Keisha's jaw dropped, her protest cut off by a wave of Carter's hand. "It's done." By lunch, Sheriff Hayes served her a restraining order, his badge glinting as he slapped it on her tray. "Stay 50 feet from Tatum," he growled, his smirk back wider than ever. "You're a thug now, girl. Act like it." The cafeteria stared, phones up, filming her shame. Keisha's hands shook, the paper crumpling in her grip, her win erased by a lie she couldn't fight. She stumbled home, the order burning a hole in her pocket, Jamal waiting with a frown. "What's this?" he asked, snatching it, his eyes scanning the text. She told him the confrontation, Lila's visit, the video, her voice hollow. He cursed, pacing the cramped living room, the plywood window mocking their fragile peace. "They're boxing you in," he said, his tone grim. "That family's got the town in their fist." Keisha sank onto the couch, her head in her hands, the fighter inside her reeling. She'd pinned Tatum, felt untouchable, but Lila's setup had turned her strength into chains. The school, the sheriff, the system, they'd all swallowed the lie, and her spirit cracked under the weight. Laredo wasn't just fighting her, it was burying her, one twisted move at a time. Keisha Evans woke with the restraining order crumpled on her nightstand, its ink bleeding into her dreams like a stain she couldn't scrub out. The video Lila Hayes had twisted, making her locker slam on Tatum look like an unprovoked assault, had turned Carver High into a minefield. She'd pinned Tatum, felt the rush of control, but Laredo flipped it fast, banning her from prom and chaining her with legal threats. Her dad, Jamal, paced their cramped rental that morning, the plywood window a grim reminder of the brick's promise. "Adapt, Keisha," he said, his voice rough from sleepless nights. "They want you to break. Don't." She nodded, her jaw tight, the fighter inside her bruised but stirring. She adapted. At school she moved like a ghost, hoodie up, braids tucked in, her steps silent on the linoleum. Tatum's crew lurked, Cole's bulk shadowing the halls, Lila's sly grin flashing from corners, but Keisha dodged them, slipping through crowds, eating lunch behind the bleachers where their eyes couldn't reach. The whispers followed. "Thug," and "dangerous," hissed by kids who'd once gawked in awe, but she tuned it out, her focus razor-sharp. She trained harder at the warehouse, her fists pounding the heavy bag until her knuckles ached, sweat soaking her shirt. Each strike was a release, a plan forming in the rhythm. Stay low, stay smart, outlast them. She thought she'd regained control, a fragile grip on a town that hated her black skin. Friday evening, that grip slipped. Keisha stopped at the gas station 2 miles from home, the sun dipping low, painting the Texas sky a bloody red. She needed milk for Jamal, who'd been welding scrap all day to fix their truck. The station was a dingy box, neon buzzing over pumps, the air thick with gasoline and dust. She grabbed a carton from the cooler, her sneakers squeaking on the grimy floor, and paid the clerk, a bored white guy with a lip full of dip. Outside, she adjusted her backpack, the weight light on her shoulders, her mind on the walk ahead. Then she heard it, the crunch of boots on gravel, too many, too close. She turned, and Cole Hayes loomed out of the dusk, his football jersey stretched tight, his blue eyes glinting with malice. 4 buddies flanked him, white guys from the team, their faces hard, bats dangling from their hands like extensions of their hate. Keisha's pulse spiked, her training kicking in, but her gut sank. This wasn't a shove or a bottle toss, this was war. "Thought you'd hide forever?" Cole growled, stepping closer, his bat tapping his palm. "Tatum says hi." The others spread out, circling her, the station's flickering light casting their shadows long and jagged. Keisha dropped the milk, the carton splitting on the asphalt, white pooling around her feet. "Back off," she said, voice steady, her stance widening as she faced them. Cole laughed, a low rumble that shook the air, and swung his bat, aiming for her ribs. She ducked, the wood whistling past, her reflexes a blur from years in Jamal's gym. She lunged, slamming her fist into Cole's nose, a wet crunch sounding. As blood sprayed. He staggered, roaring, but the others rushed in, bats swinging wild. Keisha weaved, dodging a blow to her skull, her elbow cracking into one guy's jaw, sending him sprawling. Another caught her arm, wood biting flesh, pain flaring hot and red. She twisted free, kicking his knee, the snap loud as he crumpled. Howling, 3 down, 2 to go. Cole charged, blood streaming down his chin, his bat high. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and flipped him over her shoulder, his bulk crashing into a pump with a clang that echoed. The last guy hesitated, bat trembling, then swung. Keisha caught it mid-air, yanked it free, and smashed it across his shins, dropping him to his knees. She stood panting, blood dripping from her arm, her hoodie torn, the station silent except for their groans. She'd fought like a demon, broken their attack, and felt a surge of pride, raw and fierce. She grabbed her backpack, leaving them in the dirt, thinking she'd won this round. Word spread fast. By Monday, Carver High buzzed with it. Kids whispering about Cole's busted nose, the footballers limping in the halls. Tatum's glare burned hotter, but Keisha walked tall, her cuts bandaged, her spirit unbroken. She dodged their bats, turned their ambush into her stand, and Laredo couldn't ignore it. Jamal patched her up that night, his hands steady with antiseptic, his eyes proud but wary. "You're a fighter," he said, wrapping her arm, "but they'll hit back harder." She nodded, the ache in her bones a badge, believing she'd rattled them enough to pause. That night they struck. Keisha was asleep, the house dark, the plywood window a mute sentinel. A crash jolted her awake, boots thudding on the porch, voices barking sharp and official. She stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, as the front door splintered open, deputies flooding in, flashlights blinding her. "Hands up!" one yelled, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, his gun drawn. Jamal burst from his room, shirtless, fists raised, shouting, "What the hell's this?" Sheriff Hayes stepped through, his khaki uniform crisp, his smirk wide under the brim of his hat. "Anonymous tip," he drawled. "Weapons in the house." Keisha's stomach dropped, her victory souring fast. The deputies tore through, flipping furniture, smashing lamps, glass crunching under their boots. She stood frozen, hands high, watching them rip her world apart. One yanked her mattress, another kicked over Jamal's toolbox, wrenches clattering. "Nothing here," a deputy snapped, but Hayes waved him off, eyes on Keisha. "Keep looking." Jamal lunged, shoving a deputy away from her room, his voice roaring. "You got no right." 2 grabbed him, slamming him to the floor, cuffs clicking as he thrashed. "Resisting arrest," Hayes said, casual, nodding to haul him out. Keisha screamed, lunging forward, but a deputy caught her, pinning her arms, his grip bruising. "Stay put, girl," he snarled, breath hot on her neck. She watched helpless as they dragged Jamal to a squad car, his shouts muffled by sirens. The house lay gutted, couch gutted, walls scarred, their few belongings strewn like trash. Hayes turned to her, his badge glinting in the flashlight glow. "Should have left when we told you," he said, voice low, a promise in his tone. He walked out, leaving her sobbing amidst the wreckage, glass cutting her bare feet. The milk carton's spill a distant memory. She sank to her knees, tears streaking her face, the fighter inside her reeling. She'd broken Cole's nose, dropped. His crew felt untouchable for a fleeting breath, but the Hayes family didn't play fair. They wielded Laredo like a weapon, turning her defiance into this. The sheriff hadn't just ignored the ambush, he'd used it, spun some lie about guns. To gut her home, take her dad. The deputy's boots had echoed Tatum's bottles, Cole's bats a chain of hate she couldn't snap. Her hands shook, blood smearing the floor, her spirit cracking under a town that wouldn't relent. She'd fought back, won a skirmish, but this was war and Laredo was winning. Now let's hear your voice in the comments. Drop a number 1 if you think Keisha should have run after that gas station brawl, or a 2 if you'd have stood your ground like she did. Does the sheriff raiding her house make you want to see him fall, or is he too big to topple? Smash that like button if you're screaming for Keisha to unleash hell on this town, and subscribe because the next chapter's a twist that'll shake you to your core. She beat their bats, but what happens when the Hayes family trades fists for fire? Can she claw back from this, or is Laredo about to burn her out? Keisha Evans woke to a house in ruins, the deputy's raid leaving a scar deeper than the brick ever could. Jamal was gone, hauled off in cuffs for resisting. The sheriff's smirk burned into her memory as she'd sobbed amidst shattered glass. Dawn crept through the plywood window, grey light spilling over the wrecked living room, furniture flipped, walls gouged, their few belongings strewn like confetti after a storm. She sat on the sagging couch, her bare feet bloodied from the shards, her hoodie torn from the gas station brawl with coal. The restraining order still sat crumpled on her nightstand, a mocking footnote to Laredo's latest blow. Her hands shook, not from cold but from a rage she couldn't cage, the fighter inside her clawing at a town that kept swinging. Jamal walked free by noon, bailed out with their last $50, his wiry frame hunched as he shuffled through the splintered door. They dropped it, he muttered, rubbing his wrists red from cuffs. No evidence. Keisha nodded, her throat tight, helping him right the couch, the crunch of glass under her sneakers a grim soundtrack. The deputies had found nothing, their anonymous tip a sham, but the damage was done. Sheriff Hayes hadn't needed proof. He'd wanted pain, a message to match the slashed tires and the brick's threat. Jamal sank into a chair, his eyes hollow, and Keisha knew silence wasn't enough anymore. She'd beaten Cole's crew, tasted victory, only to have it ripped away by a badge and a lie. She grabbed her phone, the cracked screen flickering to life, and started typing. Her fingers flew, spilling everything, the slurs on her locker, Tatum's frame-up, the mob's bottles, the brick, the raid. She posted it online, tagging local news, her words raw, unfiltered, a scream into Laredo's void. "This is what they do to black folks here," she wrote, attaching a shaky photo of the wrecked living room, glass glinting in the flash. Jamal watched, his jaw tight, but didn't stop her. "Be careful," he said, voice low. "They'll hate you more." She hit send, her pulse racing, knowing he was right but past caring. She'd adapted, dodged, fought, and still they'd gutted her home. This was her counterpunch. The post spread fast, likes ticking up, comments flooding in from strangers beyond Laredo's dusty grip. By evening it hit 1,000 shares, a local blog picking it up, then a news station in San Antonio. Kids at Carver High whispered about it the next day, their stares shifting from scorn to something uneasy, curious. Keisha walked the halls, her hoodie up, feeling the tide turn, a ripple she'd sparked with a cracked phone and a broken window. She'd exposed the Hayes family, laid their dirt bare, and thought maybe, just maybe, it had forced them to back off. Her cuts from the brawl scabbed over, her spirit lifting with each share, a fragile hope blooming in the wreckage. That afternoon, a man approached her outside school, his pickup idling in the lot, dust swirling around its tires. Mr. Tate was black 50-something with grey streaking his beard, his overalls stained from years running a hardware store downtown. "Saw your post," he said, voice deep, steady. "You're brave, kid, too brave for this town." Keisha tensed, her training keeping her alert, but his eyes were warm, tired, like he'd seen Laredo's hate up close. "I've got a job." "For you?" he offered, leaning against the truck. "Stocking shelves evenings, safe spot, Hayes, don't mess with me." She hesitated, Lila's fake friendliness still a fresh wound, but nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice soft. The promise of safety a lifeline she couldn't refuse. She started that night, the store a cramped maze of nails and paint cans, the air thick with sawdust and oil. Mr. Tate showed her the ropes, his hands calloused as he stacked lumber, his quiet chatter about his kids easing her guard. "Been here 20 years, he said, lifting a box. "They hate me too, but I'm too stubborn to leave." Keisha smiled, faint but real, shelving screws, the rhythm calming her frayed nerves. She worked late, the shop's fluorescent buzz a shield against the dark outside, and walked home under stars, her backpack light, her steps sure. For a week it held, a fragile peace, the online buzz growing, Tatum's crew silent. She thought. She'd turned the tide, carved out a corner where Laredo couldn't touch her. Then Lila struck. Saturday evening, Keisha was alone in the store, Mr. Tate out for a delivery, the quiet broken only by the hum of a fan. She was sorting bolts when Lila slipped in, her dark curls bouncing, her hazel eyes glinting with that sly sweetness Keisha knew too well. "Hey, tough girl," Lila said, perching on a counter, swinging her legs. "Heard you're spilling tea online. Spill some to me." Keisha froze, her hand tightening on a wrench, suspicion clawing up her spine. "Get out," she snapped, pointing to the door, but Lila just grinned, pulling out her phone, casual as if they were pals. "Come on, Vent. Tatum's a bitch, right?" "Sheriff too. Tell me." Keisha's gut screamed trap louder than last time, but anger bubbled up, hot and reckless. "They're scum," she said, voice low, stepping closer. "Tatum's a coward, Cole's a thug, and Hayes hides behind his badge. They raided my house, trashed it for nothing." Lila nodded, her grin widening, her thumb subtle on the screen. "Keep going," she cooed, but Keisha caught the glint of a red dot recording. She lunged, snatching the phone, but Lila hopped back, laughing. "Too late, hero," she chirped, darting out. Keisha stood, chest heaving, the wrench cold in her grip, knowing she'd been played again. Hours later it hit. A new video surfaced, Keisha's voice twisted into a threat. "They're scum, I'll make them pay." Lila had cut it, spliced it, stripping context, painting her as a menace plotting revenge. By midnight, it went viral, shares dwarfing her post, comments raging with "lock her up" and worse. Sunday morning, Keisha woke to sirens, not at her house but downtown. She ran, sneakers pounding gravel, and found Mr. Tate's shop engulfed, flames licking the roof, black smoke choking the sky. A white mob circled, 50 strong, their shouts a roar of hate, bottles and rocks flying at the blaze. "That's what you get, thug," one yelled, his face red, veins bulging. Keisha pushed through, her heart sinking, the heat searing her skin as she neared. Mr. Tate stood across the street, his face ashen, his hands trembling. "They saw the video," he whispered, voice breaking. "Said I harbored you. I gave it to them, Keisha. Hayes threatened my kids." She stared, betrayal cutting deeper than the glass ever had. Her ally turned Judas under the sheriff's thumb. The shop burned, paint cans popping, the mob cheering as fire ate her sanctuary. She'd trusted him, thought he'd shield her, but he'd sold her out, fed her words to the wolves. She ran, flames roaring behind her, the mob's chants fading as she broke free. Her lungs burned, her sneakers slipping on ash-strewn streets, tears streaking her face. She'd exposed the raid, rallied support, felt safe with Tate, only to have it torched by Lila's lie and his cowardice. The video wasn't just a smear, it was a match, igniting a town primed to hate her. She stumbled home, the rental dark, Jamal out scavenging parts. The plywood window mocked her, a twin to the shop's ruin, and she sank to the porch, her spirit crumbling. She'd turned the tide, thought she'd won allies, but trust was a luxury Laredo wouldn't let her keep. Jamal found her there, his truck rattling up, his eyes widening at her soot-streaked face. "What happened?" he demanded, dropping his tools. She told him the video, Tate's betrayal, the fire, her voice a hollow rasp. He cursed, kicking the porch step, splintering wood. "We're done running," he said, fierce but frayed. "But this is bigger than us." Keisha nodded, her hands balled into fists, the fighter inside her screaming through the ash. She'd beaten bats, dodged raids, but this was a blaze she couldn't punch out. The Hayes family had turned her defiance into fuel, and Laredo was burning her down, one betrayal at a time. Keisha Evans stood on her porch, ash from Mr. Tate's burned shop still clinging to her hoodie, the sting of betrayal sharper than the glass under her feet. Laredo had torched her sanctuary, turned her words into a weapon against her, and left, her sobbing in the dark. Jamal paced beside her, his wiry frame tense, his toolbox abandoned as he cursed the Hayes family's reach. "They're a machine," he said, voice raw, kicking gravel into the dirt. "But you're still here, Keisha." She nodded, wiping tears with a sooty sleeve, her fists clenching. The fighter inside her wasn't dead, just buried under the wreckage, and she'd claw it out. She'd exposed the raid, lost Tate, but the online buzz still hummed, a thread of hope in a town that wanted her gone. Monday morning, she walked into Carver High with a plan, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum, her braids swaying under her hood. The halls buzzed with whispers about the shop fire, kids glancing at her, some with pity, others with fear. She'd rallied before, posted the truth, and it had burned her, but silence wasn't an option anymore. She found 3 black students in the cafeteria, outsiders like her, their trays pushed aside as they scrolled phones. Jalen, a lanky junior with a fade, looked up first. "Saw your post," he said, voice low. "And the video. They're dogs." Beside him, Nia, a sophomore with tight curls, nodded, her eyes fierce. Tate folded, "We won't." Marcus, broad and quiet, cracked his knuckles, a silent yes. Keisha sat, her voice steady despite the ache in her bones. "We tell everyone, today, assembly's in an hour." They planned fast, Jalen drafting a speech, Nia pulling clips from her posts, Marcus guarding the door as kids eavesdropped. The assembly was mandatory, a pep rally for some football game. The gym packed with sweaty bodies and banners. Keisha slipped in, her crew behind her, her heart pounding a war drum. Principal Vargas droned at the mic, his tie choking his neck, Tatum Hayes smirking from the cheer squad, blonde hair gleaming. Sheriff Hayes lounged by the exit, his badge a silent threat. Keisha waited, her moment ticking closer. When Vargas paused, she moved, swift and sure, climbing the bleacher's edge, her voice cutting through the noise. "Y'all need to know what's real here." Heads turned, gasps rippling as she held up her phone, cracked screen blazing with her post. "Tatum framed me. Cole beat me. Sheriff trashed my house. They burned Tate's shop 'cause I spoke up. This ain't a school, it's a cage." Jalen tossed her a megaphone, stolen from the coach's office, and she roared, "We're black and they hate us for it, look." Nia played the clips, raid footage shaky but clear, glass flying, deputies smirking. The gym erupted, kids shouting, some cheering, others jeering, Tatum's face paling under the lights. Marcus shoved forward, blocking a teacher lunging for the megaphone, his bulk a wall. "She's right," he bellowed, voice booming. "Hayes runs this like a plantation." The crowd split, white kids glaring, black students nodding, a few filming with shaky hands. Vargas stormed up, red-faced, snatching the megaphone, but the damage was done. "Enough!" he yelled, voice cracking. "Sit down!" Keisha didn't budge, staring down Tatum, whose green eyes burned with fury. Sheriff Hayes pushed through, his hand on his holster, but the principal waved him off. Frantic. "Tatum Hayes, my office now." Tatum stalked out, her cheer skirt swishing, her posse trailing, stunned. Keisha jumped down, her crew flanking her, adrenaline singing in her veins. The assembly dissolved into chaos, kids spilling out, whispers exploding into shouts. By lunch, word hit, Tatum was suspended. 3 days, a slap for the frame-up, and the fire. Keisha sat under the bleachers, Jalen grinning beside her. "We shook 'em," he said, fist bumping her. Nia nodded, her curls bouncing. "They're scared now." Keisha smiled, faint but real, her cuts throbbing less, her spirit soaring. She'd rallied, exposed the rot, and won a round. Laredo might bend, she thought, tasting victory again. That taste soured fast. After school, the air thickened, a storm brewing over the flatlands. Keisha walked home with her crew, the dirt path dusty under their sneakers, laughter fading as tires screeched behind them. 4 squad cars rolled up, deputies spilling out, Sheriff Hayes at the helm, his khaki uniform crisp, his smirk back like a blade. "Keisha Evans," he barked, boots crunching gravel. "You and your little gang, hands up!" Jalen froze. Nia gasped. Marcus balled his fists, but Keisha's gut sank, knowing this was no bluff. "What for?" she snapped, voice steady despite the tremor in her legs. "Disturbing the peace," Hayes said, casual, waving a hand. "Threatening order. That stunt in there, you're done." Deputies fanned out, kettling them tight, batons tapping palms. Keisha raised her hands, her crew, following the crowd from school gawking from the fence. Hayes nodded and it hit, tear gas canisters clattering, white clouds bursting around them. Keisha coughed, eyes streaming, her lungs burning as she stumbled. Jalen retched, Nia screamed, Marcus swung wild, cracking a deputy's jaw before they tackled him, boots stomping. Keisha ran, dodging a grab, but Hayes caught her, slamming her to the dirt, his knee in her back. She gasped, gravel biting her cheek, his weight crushing her breath. "Told you, girl," he snarled, cuffing her wrists, the metal cold and tight. "You don't run this town." Deputies hauled her up, dragging her to a car. Her crew cuffed and shoved beside her. The gas cleared, revealing a dozen kids filming, phones shaky, but Hayes didn't flinch, his smirk a dare. At the station, they split them. Keisha alone in a cell, concrete cold under her, the stink of piss and metal thick. A deputy loomed, his baton tapping the bars, then swung, cracking her ribs, pain exploding white-hot. "Nigger!" he spat. Low and wet, stepping back as she curled, gasping, blood flecking her lips. Hours bled into night, her body screaming, her mind reeling. She'd rallied, won, seen Tatum fall, thought she'd shifted the game. But Hayes spun it, turned her truth into threats, his badge a hammer smashing her down. The cell door clanged, a female deputy letting her out, her face blank. "Charges. Dropped," she muttered. "Go." Keisha staggered home, ribs aching, blood drying on her chin, the rental dark, Jamal out. She sank to the porch, broken but defiant, the fighter inside her flickering through the pain. Tatum was plotting worse, she knew, a shadow lurking beyond the gas. Jamal found her, his truck rattling up, his eyes wild at her state. "What did they do?" he roared, dropping to her side, his hands hovering over her bruises. She told him, the rally, the gas, the beating, her voice a rasp. He cursed, slamming the porch rail, wood splintering. "They're killing us slow," he said, fierce but frayed. Keisha nodded, her eyes burning, staring into the night. She'd turned the... School felt victorious, but Hayes had crushed it, his fist tighter than ever. Laredo wasn't bending. It was breaking her one blow at a time. Now let's get your thoughts in the comments. Drop a number 1 if you think Keisha's rally was worth the fight, or a 2 if she should have stayed quiet after the fire. Does Hayes gassing kids make you want him behind bars, or is he untouchable in this town? Hit that like button if you're cheering for Keisha to smash this system, and subscribe, because the next move's a shock that'll flip the board. She took a stand. But what happens when Tatum trades suspension for a showdown? Can Keisha rise from this beating, or will Laredo bury her next? Keisha Evans limped through the days after the tear gas and the cell beating, her ribs a cage of pain with every breath. The deputy's baton had left bruises blooming purple across her side, a jagged map of Laredo's hate etched into her dark skin. Jamal patched her up that night, his hands trembling as he taped her ribs, antiseptic stinging worse than the gas ever did. "You're tougher than me," he muttered, his voice thick, eyes red from rage and exhaustion. She nodded, silent. The rental house a hollow shell around them, plywood windows staring like a dead eye. The rally had shaken Carver High, suspended Tatum, but Sheriff Hayes had crushed it, his badge of fist slamming her down. She'd rallied her crew, tasted victory, only to choke on gas and blood. She healed slow, sleeping fitful on the sagging couch, the ache a constant drum in her bones. Jamal hovered, brewing coffee too strong, forcing her to eat when her stomach rebelled. Rest, he'd say, but Keisha couldn't. The fighter inside her burned, fueled by the rally's echo, the online buzz still humming despite the fire, the raid, the cuffs. She trained in secret, sneaking to the warehouse when Jamal slept, her fists pounding the heavy bag until her knuckles bled through the wraps. Each strike was a promise, a vow to stand taller, hit harder. The gas had blurred her vision, the baton cracked her ribs, but they hadn't broken her. Laredo wanted her down. She'd rise instead. By Friday, she could walk without wincing, her ribs tender but bearable, her spirit coiling tight like a spring. Carver High buzzed with a pep rally, the gym a roar of banners and sweat, kids packed shoulder to shoulder for the football team's big game. Keisha slipped in, hoodie up, braids tucked, her crew scattered since the gas. Jalen nursing a sprained wrist, Nia grounded, Marcus bruised but unbowed. She stayed low, blending into the bleacher's edge, her eyes on Cole Hayes, his bulk dominating. The court. Jersey stretched over shoulders that had swung a bat at her skull. Tatum sat sidelined, suspension fresh, her blonde hair a dull gleam under the lights, her glare cutting through the crowd. Principal Vargas droned at the mic, praising the team, his voice lost in the cheers. Cole strutted forward, captain and king, his nose still swollen from her fist at the gas station, a trophy he flaunted like a badge. "We're unstoppable," he bellowed, fists pumping, the crowd roaring back. Keisha's pulse ticked up, her hands flexing, the fighter inside, her itching to move. She'd dodged his bats, taken his brother's gas, but this was public, a stage begging for a reckoning. She stood, slow and deliberate, stepping onto the gym floor, her sneakers squeaking loud in a sudden hush. "Unstoppable?" she called, voice clear, cutting through the noise like a blade. Heads turned, gasps rippling, Cole's blue eyes narrowing as he faced her. "You're a coward with a bat, Cole." The gym froze, kids leaning forward, phones slipping out, filming the quiet black girl who'd rattled their world. Cole laughed, a harsh bark, stepping closer, his bulk towering. "You're dead, bitch," he snarled, lunging, his fist cocked, to crush her jaw. Keisha moved, swift as a shadow, her training a blur. She ducked, grabbed his arm and flipped him, using his weight to send him crashing onto the polished wood with a thud that shook the rafters. The crowd erupted, cheers and screams colliding, a wave of sound crashing over her. Cole sprawled, gasping, his jersey twisted, his pride shattered in front of hundreds. Keisha stood over him, breath steady, her ribs aching but ignored, adrenaline singing in her veins. "Stay down," she said, low and firm, her eyes locking on Tatum, whose face twisted with rage from the sidelines. Vargas stormed forward, red-faced, shouting for order, but the cheers drowned him, kids jumping, filming, her name a chant on some lips. She dropped Cole, turned their king into a fool and felt untouchable, a hero carved from Laredo's dirt. She walked out, head high, the gym's roar fading behind her, her crew slipping through the crowd to grin at her back. Jalen fist-bumped. Her, his wrist taped. "You're a legend," he said, eyes bright. She smiled, faint but fierce, thinking she'd shifted the game, rattled the Hayes family's throne. Night fell, the Texas sky a bruised purple, and she headed home, the warehouse calling for a victory session. Her phone buzzed, posts exploding, her flip trending local, a spark she'd lit burning bright. She thought she'd won, a real win, one Laredo couldn't twist. Then Lila struck. Keisha's phone pinged at 10, a text from an unknown number. "Meet me, old lot off Route 6, got dirt on Tatum." She froze, her gut screaming trap, but curiosity gnawed, Lila's sly grin flashing in her mind. She'd beaten Cole, exposed the raid, survived the gas. Maybe Lila was cracking, offering a way to end this. She grabbed her hoodie, slipped out, the rental quiet, Jamal snoring on the couch. The lot was a mile out, a weed-choked stretch of dirt and rust, abandoned cars hulking in the dark. Keisha arrived, her sneakers silent on the gravel, the air thick with dust and menace. Lila stood alone, her dark curls glinting under a flickering streetlight, her smile too sweet, too still. "Hey, champ," she called, voice soft, stepping. "Closer." "Big day, huh?" Keisha tensed, her training keeping her alert, but before she could answer, the shadows moved. Tatum's crew burst out, 6 strong, chains rattling, pipes gleaming. Cole at the front, his nose taped, his eyes wild with hate. "Surprise!" Lila chirped, darting back as they closed in, a trap sprung tight. Keisha's heart slammed, her stance widening, but they were fast, too many, too armed. Cole swung a chain, the metal whistling, catching her shoulder, pain exploding red-hot. She dodged a pipe, her ribs screaming, and punched, cracking a jaw, blood spraying. They swarmed, chains lashing her legs, pipes slamming her arms, her training a blur against the onslaught. She fought like a demon, dropping 3, her fists a storm, her breath ragged. A chain caught her ankle, yanking her down, and Cole loomed. Pipe raised, his grin feral. "Night, night," he snarled, swinging for her skull. She rolled, the pipe grazing, a sickening crack as it hit bone, her vision bursting white, then black. She woke in a ditch, blood pooling under her, the night cold and silent, sirens wailing faint in the distance. Her head throbbed, a gash oozing. Above her eye, her body a map of welts and cuts, ribs cracked anew. The lot was empty, her attackers gone, the gravel stained dark with her fight. She'd dropped 3, maybe 4, but they'd dropped her harder, left her for dead. Her phone lay smashed beside her, screen dead. The buzz of her pep rally win a distant echo. She crawled, inching up, her breath hitching, pain a tide pulling her under. Jamal found her, his truck screeching up, his shout tearing the night as he leapt out. "Keisha!" He dropped beside her, hands shaking, lifting her gently, her blood smearing his shirt. "God damn it! What did they do?" She gasped, words slurring, telling him, the rally, Lila's lure, the ambush, her voice a rasp. He cursed, cradling her, his eyes wild as he gunned the engine home. She slumped in the seat, the rental's lights blurring, her spirit shattered but alive. She'd flipped coal, felt untouchable, a hero to hundreds. But Tatum's crew had turned it into this, a beating meant to kill. At home, Jamal cleaned her up, his hands steady now, antiseptic burning, bandages tight. "You're a miracle," he said, voice breaking, taping her skull. "They wanted you gone." She nodded, her eyes burning, the fighter inside her flickering through the haze. She'd won the rally, shaken Laredo, but Lila's trap had flipped it, chains and pipes her reward. The sirens grew louder, cops circling, but not for her, not yet. She'd survived barely, her body a wreck, her defiance a spark they couldn't douse. Tatum wasn't done, she knew, plotting deadlier shadows beyond this ditch, and Keisha's fight was far from over. Keisha Evans woke in agony, her body a tapestry of pain stitched together by Jamal's shaky hands. The ambush in the abandoned lot had left her broken, chains and pipes carving welts into her dark skin, a gash above her eye oozing blood that dried stiff on her cheek. She lay on the rental's sagging couch, the plywood window a grim sentinel, her ribs screaming with each shallow breath. Jamal hovered, his wiry frame tense, his coffee-stained mug trembling as he pressed ice to her swollen skull. "You're alive," he whispered, voice cracking, his eyes red from a night of stitching her back together. "That's what matters," she nodded, lips cracked, the fighter inside her a faint pulse under the wreckage. Recovery was slow, brutal, days blurring into a haze of painkillers and bandages. The pep rally triumph, flipping coal in front of hundreds, felt like a dream drowned in the ditch's dirt. Jamal kept her still, his hands gentle but firm, taping her ribs, cleaning cuts that wept red through gauze. "They wanted you dead," he said, wrapping her ankle, swollen from a chain's lash. She stared at the ceiling, cracks spiderwebbing the plaster, her mind replaying Lila's grin, Tatum's crew swarming, Cole's pipe crashing down. She dropped 3, fought like a demon, but they dropped her harder, left her bleeding, in the dark. Her phone was smashed, her victory silenced, but she was breathing, and that was a spark she'd cling to. By Wednesday she could sit up, her head throbbing less, her vision clearing. Jamal scavenged a burner phone from a pawn shop, its screen scratched but alive, and handed it to her. "Check this," he said, his tone grim but edged with hope. She scrolled, wincing as she moved, and found it, shaky footage from the lot, posted online, tagged with her name. Someone, a shadow with a phone, had filmed the ambush, chains glinting, pipes swinging, her fists flying before she fell. The video cut off as she hit the ground, but it was enough. 30 seconds of raw truth, spreading fast. Comments exploded. "Justice for Keisha. Hayes is trash," the buzz reigniting from her rally days. She posted it herself, fingers trembling, her words short but sharp. "This is Laredo. Tatum's crew tried to kill me. Sheriff won't care." It hit 1,000 views in an hour, shares doubling, news blogs latching on. Thursday morning, sirens wailed through town, not for her this time, but for them. Deputies hauled Cole, Lila, and 3 others in cuffs, their faces grim on a local station's live feed. Attempted assault, the charge. Tatum's suspension stretched, her blonde hair absent from Carver High's halls. Keisha watched from the couch, Jamal grinning beside her, his fist bumping her good shoulder. "You got 'em," he said, eyes bright. "They're done." She smiled, faint but fierce, her scars a badge of survival, her spirit lifting through the pain. The footage had flipped the script, turned her beating into their downfall, a win she could taste despite the ache in her bones. Carver High buzzed. With it Friday, kids whispering her name, some nodding as she limped in, her hoodie hiding the worst of her wounds. Jalen found her, his wrist still taped, his grin wide. "You're a ghost who won't die," he said, Nia and Marcus trailing. Their eyes proud. She thought she'd broken them. The Hayes family's grip slipping, Laredo forced to see her truth. That hope shattered by noon. Sheriff Hayes stormed into school, his khaki uniform crisp, his badge gleaming like a blade, deputies flanking him, with folders thick with lies. He cornered her in the hall, kids parting like water, his smirk back wider than ever. "Keisha Evans," he drawled, loud enough for the crowd. "You're under arrest." Her stomach dropped, her ribs throbbing as she faced him. "For what?" she snapped, voice steady despite the tremor in her legs. He slapped a paper into her chest, his hand heavy. "Assault. That video? Shows you starting it. Doctored, sure, but my grand jury don't care." She snatched it, eyes scanning, the words a blur of legal venom. The footage, her lifeline, had been twisted, cut to show her punching first. The ambush erased, her fight back framed as a brawl she'd sparked. Hayes leaned in, breath sour with tobacco. "You're a thug, girl. Told you I run this." Deputies grabbed her, cuffs clicking tight, her wrists raw from the cell days before. They paraded her out, past gawking students, phones up, filming. Her shame, her hoodie yanked back to show her battered face. Jalen shouted. Nia lunged, but deputies shoved them down, batons tapping a warning. The station was a cold repeat, concrete under her, the stink of bleach and metal thick. Hayes didn't beat her this time, just watched from the bars, his smirk a silent gloat as she sat, cuffed to a bench. "Your daddy's next," he said, casual, turning away. She froze, the threat sinking deep, her mind racing to Jamal alone in that gutted house. Hours later, they cut her loose. Pending trial, a deputy muttering, but the damage was done. She stumbled home, dusk settling over Laredo, the flatlands a bruised purple, her spirit cracking under the weight. Jamal met her at the door, his face ashen, a pink slip crumpled in his fist. "Fired," he said, voice hollow, tossing it onto the couch. "Shop said I'm unreliable. Hayes called him." She sank beside him, the rental's silence heavy, the plywood window mocking her. "And the house," he added, eyes down. "Banks foreclosing. Missed payments." "Bullshit!" Keisha's breath hitched, her hands shaking, the fighter inside her drowning in a tide she couldn't punch. The video had won her a moment, locked up Tatum's crew, but Hayes had flipped it, turned her truth into a noose tightening around her life. She limped to her room, the mattress still flipped from the raid, her few clothes scattered. The burner. Phone buzzed, Jalen texting, "They're killing you slow, we're here." She didn't reply, her fingers numb, the screen blurring as tears welled. She'd rallied, exposed, fought, survived, thought she'd turned Laredo's tide. Cole's arrest? Tatum's fall? They'd felt like cracks in the Hayes empire, but the sheriff had rebuilt it stronger, crueler, his badge a sledgehammer smashing her down. Her ribs ached, her skull throbbed, but the real pain was deeper, a hollow eating her core. Jamal knocked, leaning in, his eyes searching hers. "We can leave," he said, soft but firm. "Start over, anywhere but here." She shook her head, tears spilling, her voice a rasp. "They'd follow. They hate us too much." He sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, the weight a lifeline she barely felt. "You're still my fighter," he whispered, but she didn't believe it, not now. The house creaked, foreclosure looming, Jamal jobless, her trial a shadow waiting to choke her. She'd leaked the footage, won a battle, but Hayes had won the war, stripping everything she'd clung to. She curled up, the mattress cold, her scars a map of every fight she'd endured. The pep rally cheers echoed, a ghost of triumph drowned by cuffs and lies. She'd dropped Cole, survived chains, but this was bigger, a system rigged to break her, her blackness a crime they'd never forgive. The burner buzzed again, ignored, her crew's faith a distant light she couldn't reach. Her defiance crumbled, the fighter inside her a flicker buried under Laredo's dirt, believing she'd lost it all. The rental stood silent, a tomb for her spirit, and she closed her eyes, the weight of Hayes's smirk crushing her into the dark. Keisha Evans sat in her cell, the concrete cold under her bruised thighs, the stink of bleach and rust thick in her nose. The grand jury's indictment pinned her as the aggressor, twisting her ambush footage into a lie that cuffed her wrists, and paraded her through Carver High. Her ribs ached from the deputy's baton, her skull throbbed from Cole's pipe, and her spirit lay shattered after Laredo stripped her bare. Jamal fired, their house foreclosed. She'd leaked the truth, won a fleeting victory only to have Sheriff Hayes bury her in this 6x8 tomb, her trial a noose tightening slow. But she wasn't done. The fighter inside her flickered, a ember refusing to die, and she'd fan it even here. She trained in the dark, silent push-ups on the gritty floor, her arms trembling but steady, sweat beading on her dark skin despite the jail's chill. The guards smirked through the bars, their boots tapping, but she ignored them, her breath a rhythm rebuilding her strength. Her cellmate, a wiry girl with a scar across her lip, watched, silent, then joined, their grunts a quiet defiance echoing off the walls. Keisha's mind sharpened, replaying every blow, every betrayal, Tatum's smirk, Lila's grin, Hayes' badge. She'd lost everything, house, dad's job, freedom, but she'd survived worse and this cage wouldn't break her. She'd fight back somehow, her fists useless, but her will a blade she'd hone. A guard changed the game. Officer Reese, a black woman with tired eyes and a limp, slipped her a pencil and paper one night, her voice low. "Saw your story online," she whispered, glancing at the hall. "Write it. I'll get it out." Keisha froze, suspicion clawing up her spine. Lila's trap still raw, but Reese's gaze held no deceit, just a flicker of something like pride. She took it, her fingers trembling, and wrote, the pencil scratching her truth into the page. The slurs, the frame-up, the mob, the raid, the fire, the ambush, the jail, all poured out. A letter, raw and unfiltered, ending with, "Laredo wants me dead 'cause I'm black and won't bow." Reese smuggled it out, and by morning, it hit. The letter went viral, shared thousands of times, news stations in San Antonio and Dallas blasting it. Keisha's fight, trending with hashtags demanding justice. Protests erupted outside the jail, chants of her name shaking the bars, tires screeching as cars circled Laredo's dusty streets. Jamal got through, his voice crackling on a payphone call, fierce and proud. "They're marching, Keisha. You're waking them up." She gripped the receiver, tears stinging, her spirit surging through the pain. The footage had sparked arrests, but this lit a fire, a roar Hayes couldn't silence. Friday, the tide turned. The protests swelled, hundreds strong, black and brown. Faces mixed with white allies, signs stabbing the air. "Free Keisha, jail Hayes." The governor's office buckled, pressure mounting, and charges dropped by noon, the cell door clanging open. Reese nodded as Keisha stepped out, her limp heavier, her eyes warm. "Keep fighting," she said, slipping her a worn boxing glove keychain, a quiet gift. Keisha took it, her ribs aching but her head high, walking into the sun, Jamal waiting, his truck rattling, his arms crushing her in a hug. "You're free," he whispered, voice breaking. She nodded, tasting victory, thinking she'd broken Laredo's grip at last. That freedom lasted hours. Dusk settled over the flatlands, a bruised purple sky stretching wide, and Keisha sat on the rental's porch, the foreclosure notice taped to the door. Jamal inside packing their last scraps. Her phone buzzed, Jalen texting, "Watch out, Tatum's unhinged." Her gut twisted, the fighter's instinct flaring, but before she could move, a van screeched up, black and unmarked, dust swirling in its wake. Tatum leapt out, her blonde, hair wild, her green eyes manic, a tire iron in her grip. Lila followed, sly grin gone, her curls matted, and 3 goons spilled after, chains rattling, faces hard with hate. "Where's your daddy?" Tatum snarled, storming closer, her voice a shriek. "Charges dropped, huh? Not for long." Keisha stood, ribs screaming, her stance widening as they fanned out, the porch creaking under her sneakers. "Leave him," she said, low and firm. But Tatum laughed, a jagged sound swinging the iron at the air. "He's mine," she spat, nodding to Lila, who darted inside, the goons charging Keisha. She dodged a chain, her training a blur, pain lancing her side as she punched, cracking a nose, blood spraying. Another caught her arm, twisting, her ribs popping, and she stumbled, gasping, the porch rail splintering under her weight. Inside, Jamal roared, a crash echoing, glass shattering as Lila dragged him out, his wiry frame thrashing, blood streaming from a gash on his brow. "Keisha!" he shouted, kicking, but Tatum swung, the iron cracking his knee, a sickening snap, dropping him to the dirt. Keisha screamed, lunging, but a chain lashed her legs, yanking her down, gravel biting her palms. The goons swarmed Jamal, boots stomping, fists flying, his grunts turning to groans, blood pooling under him. Tatum loomed, her iron raised, her face twisted with rage. "You ruined us," she hissed, aiming for his skull, but Keisha broke free, rolling, her body a wreck but her will steel. She launched, tackling Tatum, the iron clattering as they hit the ground, dust choking the air. Keisha punched, her knuckles splitting, Tatum's cheek bruising under her fist, a wild howl escaping the blonde's throat. Lila shrieked, clawing at Keisha, but she elbowed back, cracking ribs, her training a storm unleashed. The goons turned, chains swinging, but Keisha was faster, flipping one into the porch steps, his head thudding wood, another crumpling under a knee to his gut. She stood panting, blood dripping from her brow, her ribs a furnace facing Tatum, who crawled, gasping, her iron out of reach. Sirens wailed, close now, lights flashing red and blue through the dusk, cops swarming, not Hayes's crew but state troopers, badges glinting unfamiliar. "Hands up!" One barked, guns drawn, and Keisha froze, her arms high, Jamal moaning in the dirt. Tatum sprawled, Lila clutching her side. The troopers cuffed the goons, yanked Tatum up, her screams shrill as they dragged her to a car. Keisha dropped beside, Jamal, her hands shaking, pressing his wounds, blood slick under her fingers. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears mixing with dust, his breath shallow but alive. A trooper knelt, radio crackling, his voice calm. "Ambulance is coming. You're safe." Keisha nodded, her head spinning, the fighter inside her roaring. Through the chaos, she'd trained in jail, sparked protests, walked free, only to face Tatum's final blow. The letter had won her release, but this was her stand, dismantling Tatum's crew with lethal precision, sparing her life when she could have ended it. Cops swarmed, lights painting the rental's ruin, and she held Jamal, her scars a testament, her spirit reigniting. She'd thought it was over, freedom hers, but Tatum had pushed her to the edge, and Keisha had pushed back, a reckoning Laredo couldn't bury. Jamal's eyes fluttered, his hand gripping hers, weak but fierce. "You're my fighter," he rasped, blood flecking his lips, and she smiled, faint but real. The ambulance's wail cutting the night. The troopers hauled Tatum away, her curses fading, Lila cuffed beside her, the goons groaning in the dirt. Keisha stood, ribs cracked, body battered but unbroken. The rental a battlefield she'd won. She'd survived the ambush, the jail, the fire, and now this, her fists sparing Tatum when they could have crushed her. The Hayes family's last. Strike had failed, but as the stretcher took Jamal, her eyes burned, knowing Laredo's hate wasn't done with her yet. Keisha Evans slumped in the passenger seat of Jamal's rattling truck, her hands slick with his blood, the ambulance's red lights fading into Laredo's bruised dusk. She dismantled Tatum's crew on the porch, her fists a storm of precision, sparing the blonde's life when she could have crushed her skull with that tire iron. State troopers had swarmed, cuffing Tatum, Lila, and their goons, their chains and pipes useless against the law's sudden grip. Jamal lay on a stretcher, his knee shattered, his brow gashed but alive, his weak grip on her hand a lifeline through the chaos. Her ribs screamed, her skull throbbed, cuts weeping red down her dark skin. But she'd won, a raw, battered victory, carved from a town that wanted her dead. The hospital was a blur of antiseptic and beeping machines. Jamal wheeled into surgery, his voice rasping her name as they took him. Keisha sat in the waiting room, her hoodie torn, bandages itching under blood-streaked sleeves, her braids matted with sweat and dust. Troopers lingered, their radios crackling, one jotting notes, his face grim but kind. "You're a hell of—" "A fighter," he said, handing her water, the plastic cup trembling in her grip. She nodded, throat too dry to speak, her eyes on the double doors, praying Jamal would walk out. Hours dragged, her body a furnace of pain, but her spirit flared, the fighter inside her blazing through the wreckage. She'd rescued him, turned. Tatum's last strike into a rout, and Laredo couldn't bury her this time. By dawn, Jamal stabilized, his knee bolted with pins, his face bruised but breathing steady in a sterile bed. Keisha sat beside him, her hand on his, the beat of his heart monitor a rhythm she clung to. "You're my rock," he whispered, eyes fluttering, and she smiled, faint but fierce, her scars a testament to every blow she'd taken. The troopers returned, their news sharp. Tatum and Lila faced assault charges, the goons too, the rental's porch a crime scene taped off in yellow. Sheriff Hayes resigned that morning, his badge tarnished, his empire dust under the governor's glare, protests still echoing in Laredo's streets. Keisha's letter, her footage, her fight, they'd cracked his reign, a win she'd bled for over months of hell. They limped home, the rental a gutted shell, foreclosure stalled by the chaos, their belongings packed in trash bags. Jamal leaned, on crutches, his wiry frame fragile but unbowed, Keisha's arm around him as they shuffled inside. The town reeled, news vans circling, Carver High silent, kids whispering her name like a legend. Jalen, Nia, and Marcus showed, their faces bright, fists bumping her good shoulder. "You're untouchable," Jalen said, grinning, his wrist healed. Nia hugged her, tight despite her ribs, whispering, "We're free 'cause of you." Marcus nodded, his bulk a quiet shield, and Keisha felt it, a shift, Laredo's rules, rewritten by her hands. Protests grew, hundreds marching, signs stabbing the air, justice won, Keisha's fight, black voices loud, white allies joining, a tide Hayes couldn't stem. Online her story soared, millions watching her footage, her letter, donations pouring in to save the house, to fight her trial's ghost. She sat on the couch, Jamal beside her, the plywood window a relic of battles past, and thought she'd done it. She'd flipped coal, exposed the raid, survived the fire, beaten the ambush, rescued her dad, toppled a sheriff. Her scars ached, her body a wreck, but her spirit soared, a hero forged in Laredo's dirt, believing she'd won, truly won, a legacy of defiance etched into the town's bones. That belief held for 3 days. Keisha unpacked, her hands slow, ribs protesting as she sorted clothes, Jamal's crutches tapping the floor. The news droned, a San Antonio anchor praising her, a symbol of resilience, her face flashing on screen, battered but unbroken. She smiled, faint, unpacking a bag, when her burner phone buzzed, a news alert jarring the quiet. Breaking. Tatum Hayes missing. Hate group claims her as martyr. Her stomach dropped, the phone slipping, clattering on the linoleum. Jamal looked up, his eyes narrowing, and she grabbed it, scrolling, her pulse a hammer in her ears. The alert linked a video, grainy but clear. A masked figure in a black hood, voice distorted, standing before a Confederate flag. "Tatum Hayes is ours," it rasped, a rifle propped beside them. "That black bitch took her, took our town. We're coming for Keisha Evans, for blood, for justice. Laredo's ours again." The screen cut to static, comments raging below. "Kill her. White power." A storm brewing online. Keisha's breath hitched, her hands shaking. The fighter inside her coiling tight, dread clawing up her spine. She'd spared Tatum, left her cuffed, thought it was over. But this was worse. A shadow rising from her victory's ashes. Jamal snatched the phone, his face ashen, scrolling fast. "They're a militia," he said, voice low, fierce. "Been quiet till now. You broke Hayes and they're pissed." Keisha stood, ribs aching, staring at the plywood. The town beyond it, silent but simmering. Protest still marched, her name a chant. But this was no sheriff, no school clique. This was a war she'd sparked without knowing. She'd won, toppled Tatum, saved Jamal, but her mercy had birthed a beast. A hate group claiming her foe as their saint, her fight their rallying cry. Night fell, the flatlands dark, cicadas screaming in the heat, and Keisha sat on the porch, her scars itching, her mind racing. Jamal hobbled out, crutches thudding, his eyes wild. "We can leave," he said, urgent, leaning close. "Now, before they move." She shook her head, tears welling, her voice a rasp. "They'd find us. I started this." He gripped her shoulder, firm despite his tremble. "You didn't. They did." She nodded, but doubt gnawed, her triumph souring fast. She'd rewritten Laredo's rules, Thought she'd freed it, but hate didn't sleep, and her fists couldn't stop this. Then it came. A crash shattering the quiet, glass exploding inward as a Molotov cocktail burst through the window. Flames, roaring up the curtains, licking the walls. Keisha leapt up, Jamal shouting, "Get out!" As smoke choked the air, fire racing across the floor. She grabbed him, his crutches falling, dragging him through the blaze, her ribs screaming, her lungs burning. The rental erupted, wood cracking, heat searing her skin as they stumbled into the yard, collapsing on gravel, the house a pyre behind them. Flames painted the night, a beacon of rage, and she saw them. Shadows in the dark, pickup trucks circling slow, headlights glinting, a horn blaring a war cry. Keisha stood, Jamal coughing beside her, his blood-streaked face lit by the inferno, her hands balling into fists. The trucks vanished, tires screeching into the flatlands, leaving her staring at the ruin, her victory a curse. She'd beaten Tatum, spared her, toppled Hayes, sparked protests, thought she'd won a legacy of justice. But Laredo's hate had twisted it, her fight igniting a racial war she never wanted, a militia rising from the ashes of her mercy. Her scars burned, her body a wreck, but her spirit shifted, not breaking but bending, a hunted legend in a town. She'd freed and damned. Jamal gripped her arm, pulling her back, his voice hoarse. "We run. Now." She nodded, tears streaming, the fire's roar drowning her thoughts, the rental a tomb for her triumph. They staggered to his truck, the engine coughing to life, headlights cutting the smoke as they peeled out, the flatlands swallowing them. Her silhouette stood stark against the blaze, a figure etched in flame, not a victor but a spark, a hunted ghost fleeing a war she'd birthed. Laredo burned behind her, its hate unleashed, her fight a double-edged blade that cut deeper than she'd ever dreamed. Keisha Evans' journey in Laredo teaches us raw, unflinching truths about resilience, systemic hate, and the cost of standing tall. Her story isn't just a fight against bullies, it's a battle against a town rigged to crush her for being black and bold. The first lesson is courage under fire. Keisha faced slurs, beatings, and betrayal, yet she rose each time, her fists and spirit defying a world that demanded her silence. She didn't just survive, she fought back, proving strength isn't about winning every round but refusing to stay down. Second, it exposes the depth of prejudice. From Tatum's taunts to Sheriff Hayes' badge, racism wasn't personal, it was structural, a machine grinding her down through mobs, raids, and lies. Her triumph over Cole and Tatum showed individual. Victories can spark hope, but the militia's rise revealed hate's stubborn roots. Third, it's about unintended consequences. Keisha's mercy spared Tatum, but that choice ignited a war she never meant to start, teaching us that justice can birth chaos when systems fester unchecked. Finally, it's a call to question power. Her letter and footage shook Laredo, proving one voice can rattle a throne even if the fallout burns. Keisha's not a hero in a cape. She's a fighter in a hoodie, scarred and hunted, showing us resilience comes with a price. So what do you think? Did Keisha's fight change Laredo for better or worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if her grit inspires you, and subscribe for more real stories that hit hard. Share this if you stand against injustice, and thanks for riding this wild journey with us. Here's to finding strength in the toughest battles. Stay fierce out there.